Two young women were sitting at a table in a cafe, peacefully chatting. At least, that's how it appeared from the outside. In reality, their conversation went far beyond ordinary small talk. One of the friends was older, her face distorted by barely concealed anger and hatred. Because she was clearly nervous, her hair was disheveled and looked unkempt. At one point, she pulled a baseball bat from under the table and showed it to her companion, explaining how it could be used in action. Then her face lit up, and an equally absurd idea came to her. They should take a large dose of a psychotropic substance, fill a syringe, and inject it straight into the heart. The other girl's eyes widened, but she was willing to do almost anything to gain the favor of the woman she looked up to, and $500 wouldn't hurt either. Despite the utter foolishness of the two friends' discussion, that conversation in the cafe had serious consequences. One person lost their life, and 3 others ended up in prison. And before we get started, be kind enough to support my channel. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and stay active. It will help a lot. I will be very grateful to you for that. Let's get started. In 2015, Kendra Hatcher turned 35. She was born and raised in the small village of Pleasant Plains, Illinois, where she was brought up with strong Christian values. Pleasant Plains is located just 24 minutes northwest of Springfield, with a population of about 800. In high school, Kendra was heavily involved in sports, serving as the captain of the cheerleading squad and the women's volleyball team. Although Kendra looked like the protagonist of a Hollywood movie, she was beautiful not only on the outside, but also on the inside. She did everything she could to help her community, leading Bible study classes for children from disadvantaged families and even traveling abroad to help build churches. After graduating high school, small-town graduates typically chose one of 2 paths. Some stayed where they were born, got jobs, started families, and had children, while others sought to step out of their comfort zone, moved to big cities, attended college, and tried to build a life different from that of their parents. Kendra definitely belonged to the second group. She wanted to achieve great things in the field of medicine, so after finishing high school, she left her hometown and enrolled at a university in Greencastle, Indiana. During spring break in college, Kendra didn't party on the beach like most of her peers. She spent all her free time working with Habitat for Humanity. This international nonprofit organization focused primarily on building simple and affordable housing for the poor and homeless around the world. After graduating college with a major in Spanish and a minor in biochemistry, Kendra enrolled in the University of Kentucky's dental school. There, she met a young man, and after completing her studies, she married him. As often happens, young love fades quickly when real life begins outside the campus. At some point, Kendra and her husband realized they had completely different goals in life, and neither was willing to compromise. The couple parted ways amicably, each going their separate way. Kendra Hatcher always loved working with children, so it came as no surprise when she took a job in pediatric dentistry. Even during Christmas breaks in college, she had traveled to Ecuador to provide free dental care to local children. Now, Kendra chose a job that brought her joy and filled her with positive emotions. Interacting with children never left her indifferent. When talking on the phone with her family, the young woman often shared stories about her little patients. In 2015, Kendra Hatcher lived in Dallas, Texas, where she made many friends. Together, they attended concerts, sports games, visited museums, spent time in bars, or simply held casual gatherings over coffee. Kendra worked as a pediatric dentist at a company that provided high-quality dental care to children from disadvantaged families. It was the perfect place where she could work with kids, help those in need, and earn a decent salary. Kendra moved into a residential complex in downtown Dallas, which had its own pool and gym, with stunning views of the city from the windows. She was quite content with her life. The only thing she truly lacked was a partner, a soulmate. It was clear that Hatcher could take care of herself financially, but she longed for someone close to share both joys and sorrows. Kendra never lacked suitors, but she wasn't interested in fleeting relationships. Many men showed her attention and tried to get acquainted, but Hatcher was never truly interested in any of them. The young woman occasionally went on dates, but further communication rarely followed. One meeting was enough for her to realize that a man wasn't the hero of her story. Kendra knew what she wanted and wasn't about to lower her standards. Having experienced a failed marriage in her youth, Hatcher wasn't in a rush to tie her life to the first person she met and didn't want to repeat the same mistake. In 2012, a famous online dating app appeared. Like most single people, Kendra was intrigued by the idea of online communication. She created an account and began browsing photos of men looking for their other half. She scrolled through countless photos and read dozens of bios. Some candidates seemed insincere or uninteresting to her. The beliefs and values of others were far from her outlook on life. She had almost given up hope when one day she stumbled upon the profile of a man named Ricardo Paniagua. In his bio, Ricky shared that he was living out his childhood dream of becoming a doctor and was looking for a woman who understood what it meant to have a busy schedule. He worked as a dermatologist and was an assistant professor at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. Like Hatcher, this man devoted much of his time to helping others, enjoyed sports, and lived life to the fullest. Kendra and Ricky connected, and the attraction was mutual. They started chatting through the app, then exchanged phone numbers, and soon began planning their first date. On May 24, 2015, Hatcher and Paniagua met in real life for the first time. Kendra immediately realized that Ricky was unlike any of her previous suitors, and he, in turn, saw in his new acquaintance a woman he could envision a long-term future with. From that moment, things moved very, very quickly. The couple's beliefs and interests were aligned. Ricky, too, had been married before, so he wasn't in a hurry to commit to just anyone. The young couple spent all their free time together, arranging unique dates for each other, going on romantic weekend getaways, and just 3 months after meeting, actively discussing their plans for the future. The holidays were approaching, and the couple planned to visit Kendra's relatives in Illinois, where her family eagerly awaited meeting the man she had told them so much about. Her loved ones saw how Kendra's eyes sparkled when she spoke of her partner and dreamed of finally meeting him. Though no official proposal had yet been made, the couple was already planning a wedding, discussing the budget for the event and ironing out details. They even started saving money for the upcoming ceremony. A romantic vacation was planned in the beautiful, picturesque resort town of Cancun, Mexico, where Ricky was likely planning to propose. In short, everything was going wonderfully and would likely have ended in a lavish wedding if not for a tragedy. On September 2nd, 2015, a Wednesday, Kendra spent the entire day at work. After finishing her shift at 7:42 p.m., she drove into the underground parking garage of her residential complex, and just a few minutes later, a deafening scream and several gunshots echoed through the garage. At that moment, besides Hatcher, another resident, a young man named Hashim, was in the parking garage. He heard the shots and saw a Jeep Cherokee speeding out of the garage. Someone was clearly in a hurry to flee the scene. Hashim got into his car and headed toward the exit, looking around and trying to spot the victim. Then, near one of the cars, he saw a woman lying on the ground. Hashim immediately called 911 and reported the shooting in the parking garage. Emergency services arrived quickly, but unfortunately, it was already too late. The victim Hashim had noticed died almost instantly. It was 35-year-old Kendra Hatcher, a successful pediatric dentist. The police's initial theory was a failed robbery that ended in a fatal outcome. It wasn't necessary to know the victim personally to guess her financial status. The residential complex was home to fairly affluent people. The entire garage was immediately cordoned off, and detectives began collecting evidence. Bullet fragments and a gun magazine were found on the ground. Kendra's cell phone lay near her body, but her purse was nowhere to be found. The longer the police examined the crime scene, the more they doubted the initial theory and became convinced that Hatcher hadn't been chosen as a victim by chance. The woman had been shot execution style. She was wounded in the back and the upper part of her head. The bullet exited through her chin. Judging by the gunpowder residue, Her hands were raised and held behind her head when she was shot. The crime was deeply personal, making it almost unbelievable. Everyone who knew Kendra said it was hard to find a kinder, more compassionate person, always ready to drop everything and help. Hatcher worked with children, and there wasn't the slightest chance that a pediatric dentist could have made enemies. For the victim's loved ones, her tragic death was an absolute shock. News of Hatcher's death began appearing in newspaper headlines and on broadcasts across the country on the night of September 3rd. When one of her friends was told that Kendra had passed away, she couldn't believe it. The woman frantically dialed her number, praying that Hatcher would pick up and say it was some terrible mistake. But the call kept going to voicemail. Another friend, upon hearing the news, rushed to Kendra's home. When no one answered the door, she simply sat on the floor and sobbed. Hatcher's death broke the hearts of many who surrounded her. Fortunately, the parking garage was equipped with surveillance cameras. They captured the aforementioned black Jeep Cherokee entering the garage at 7:15 p.m., about 30 minutes before Kendra returned home from work. This further supported the theory that the perpetrator was waiting for a specific victim. When Hatcher got out of her car, the shooter approached her. After pulling the trigger several times, he grabbed the victim's purse and jumped back into the Jeep in the passenger seat. Then the black vehicle sped out of the underground parking garage. Most interestingly, someone else was driving. So, the criminal didn't act alone. Moreover, judging by the surveillance footage, a woman was in the driver's seat. Due to the poor quality of the recording, investigators couldn't immediately identify the person, so they appealed to the public, asking anyone who recognized the vehicle or its passengers to contact the police. The news broadcasted the surveillance footage from the underground garage. The media went wild. Upon learning that a successful female dentist had been brutally killed in the parking garage of an upscale building, the story spread like wildfire across Dallas. Almost the next day, the police received a phone call. A man named Jose Ortiz was very nervous as he told the operator that the vehicle in the surveillance footage belonged to him. Jose quickly assured the dispatcher that he had nothing to do with what happened in the garage. He had lent the car to a friend, never imagining he'd see it on the local news in connection with a brutal murder. Most interestingly, this friend, more accurately, a female friend, was sitting in a restaurant with the Jeep's owner at the time of the crime, so the caller, as expected, was utterly confused. Investigators learned that the friend Jose had lent his Jeep to was named Brenda Delgado. When Ortiz asked the woman how his car ended up on the surveillance cameras in the residential complex's parking garage, Brenda tried to dodge the question and lie, saying he was mistaken. But after persistent questioning, she gave in and admitted she had lent the Jeep to her friend because she didn't have a car. According to Delgado, her acquaintance was involved in selling illegal substances. This information did nothing to reassure Jose. Learning that his Jeep might have been used in a drug deal, the young man panicked and immediately decided to call the police. However, Brenda didn't like this idea at all. She got angry and tried to scare her friend, saying he could be deported if he contacted the cops. Instead, she suggested repainting the car a different color so it couldn't be traced. This seemed more than suspicious. The police considered Jose's tip credible, and detectives decided to speak with Brenda Delgado directly. During the interrogation, the woman went out of her way to appear helpful. She explained that she had never heard of Kendra Hatcher before and had never seen her. At the time of the crime, Brenda was at a small restaurant with her friend Jose. She even had a receipt, which she promptly showed the officers. As for the Jeep, Delgado had let her acquaintance, Crystal Cortez, use it. So now the police had the names of Brenda, who had initially asked Jose to lend her the car, and Crystal, who had borrowed the vehicle from Delgado. Jose and Brenda had an alibi. They were at the restaurant at the exact time the attack occurred. So, the next person of interest in the case was, of course, Crystal Cortez. The girl was only 23 years old, while her friend Brenda was 31. Crystal immediately confessed that she was indeed driving the Jeep that evening and told the detectives the following story. According to Cortez, she was driving with her young son. When she stopped and was about to get out, an unknown man climbed into the car and, threatening her with a gun, forced her to drive him to a residential apartment complex. Crystal was worried about her child, so she did everything the assailant ordered. She even heard the man shoot someone in the parking garage but was too scared to turn her head and look at the victim. Of course, the investigators understood how strange this story sounded. If we assume the mother was concerned for her son's safety, she wouldn't have sat and waited in the car for the assailant to return. She would have floored the gas pedal and sped away. The story didn't hold up to scrutiny, but the investigators didn't interrupt the storyteller. Meanwhile, Crystal kept talking. She told the officers that after the shots rang out, the hijacker returned to the Jeep and ordered her to drive him to the other side of Dallas, then simply got out of the car and disappeared into the trees. This sounded completely implausible. It's unlikely a criminal who had just committed a murder would let go of a woman who saw his face and could report him to the police. The police immediately began verifying Crystal's story. They reviewed the surveillance footage from different angles and discovered there was no child in the car at the time. Cortez was called in for another interrogation, where they pointed out that she was in the car alone with the criminal. When Crystal realized her lie had been exposed, she completely changed her story. This time, she admitted that the shooter hadn't threatened her and no one had hijacked the car. She said she had voluntarily driven the man to Kendra Hatcher's residential complex, but only knew he was planning to rob someone, not take a life. Cortez claimed she had no idea the shooter had a gun. The detectives asked Crystal why she had agreed to do something like that in the first place. It turned out the idea belonged to her friend Brenda. She had offered $500 just for Cortez to drive the Jeep and then help the robber escape. The girl insisted to the police that $500 was a lot of money for her because she was a single mother who needed to care for her young son. So who was Brenda Delgado, and what could have connected her to the deceased Kendra Hatcher? Brenda was born and raised in central Mexico before her family moved to Dallas, Texas. From childhood, the girl dreamed of achieving something greater in life. She saw how hard it was for her immigrant parents to support a large family. Her father worked in construction, and her mother cleaned other people's homes. Brenda wanted her parents to be proud of her, and at the same time wanted a more stable, prosperous life. After high school, Delgado enrolled in college, and finally decided she wanted to pursue dentistry. Since her parents couldn't afford to pay for her college education during breaks between classes, the girl worked 2 jobs, as a dental assistant and at a spa, providing teeth whitening services. This helped her pay for tuition and buy the necessary textbooks for her major. Brenda was also very religious and regularly attended church. In 2012, shortly after the dating app appeared, she met Ricky Paniagua online, and their relationship developed rapidly. 3 months after their first date, Brenda moved into the young man's luxurious apartment in Dallas. For the first time in a long while, she felt the taste of life. In June 2013, Delgado learned she was pregnant. However, after discussing the situation with her boyfriend, she decided to terminate the pregnancy. Though she agreed with her partner's reasoning, the procedure deeply affected her emotional state. Since Brenda hid the pregnancy from her friends and family, she had no one to share her feelings with. In notes on her phone, she described the emotions she experienced after visiting the clinic and wrote herself a motivational note that she and Ricky would still have children and everything would be wonderful. Gradually, her emotions settled and life returned to normal. That same year, Delgado enrolled in a dental hygiene school, and by early 2014, she was showing off a new engagement ring to her classmates. She and Ricky were discussing their future wedding, and their life together seemed perfect. But in July 2014, Brenda came to class sobbing uncontrollably. Several classmates asked what had happened. She told them that Ricky had suggested they break up and asked her to move out of the apartment. Brenda desperately clung to her dream that she and Paniagua would live happily ever after, get married, and one day have children. When the breakup happened, her dream shattered to pieces. Brenda was inconsolable. She stopped caring about her grades, skipped classes, and just a few weeks after the breakup with Ricky, she completely dropped out of the program. The girl set a goal to win back her boyfriend at all costs. Over the next few months, Brenda managed to restore her relationship with Ricky, though they now lived separately, and they were still considered a couple. The young man even paid some of Delgado's monthly bills, and occasionally, they started talking about marriage again. The couple fully reconciled, but the next breakup happened as quickly as they had gotten back together. In February 2015, Ricky broke up with Brenda, suggesting they remain just friends. Brenda agreed, but couldn't understand why she had been dumped, or what made other women better. At some point, her resentment toward her ex-boyfriend turned into an obsession. She had access to his email and app passwords, so she saw every message and email Ricky ever sent to other women. Additionally, Brenda had installed a program that allowed her to track her ex's location. So, wherever he was, the girl would show up unexpectedly, as if by chance, attributing it to fate. It might have been fine if, in May 2015, Ricky hadn't texted Brenda that he had met the girl of his dreams, and things were serious. Delgado's obsession reached an entirely new level, as if she finally realized she had little chance of winning back her ex-boyfriend. Although Ricky didn't mention the name of his new partner, with access to his messages, Brenda quickly tracked down Kendra Hatcher. Delgado saw every message between the lovers, and it filled her with absolute rage. She meticulously documented Paniagua's new relationship, taking screenshots of text messages and flight bookings. Then she found her rival's social media profile and saw that Kendra was undeniably in love with Ricky. Hatcher constantly posted their joint photos, writing about lavish dates and romantic out-of-town trips. Every post where Kendra shared her newfound happiness with loved ones, family, and friends was like pouring fuel on the fire burning inside Brenda. Soon, this obsession with her ex consumed Delgado entirely. She couldn't control herself. All her conversations revolved around Ricky and his new girlfriend. Even on dates with other guys, the topic didn't change. She started staking out Kendra's home to see her rival in person. Then she began looking for someone who could harm Hatcher. What started as a simple desire to scare her soon turned into a thirst for blood. And who among her acquaintances could have imagined that Brenda was seriously offering them the role of a hitman? In mid-August, a few weeks before the attack on Kendra, Delgado was determined to take her rival's life. She needed to find an accomplice to deflect suspicion from herself. That's how Crystal Cortez got dragged into the scheme. Crystal met Brenda through mutual friends. She lived with her son at her grandparents' house and was desperately in need of money. $500 for such a job seemed like a huge sum to the single mother, and she easily agreed to participate in the attack on an innocent woman. Crystal's claims to investigators that she didn't know about the planned assassination were a blatant lie. She fully understood what she was getting into and was now just trying to wriggle out of it. But money wasn't the only reason Cortez took part in the attack on Kendra Hatcher. Delgado was a sort of idol for Crystal. The girl wanted to emulate her in everything. She admired Brenda's style and demeanor and sought to earn her approval. Just a couple of weeks after meeting, Brenda and Crystal were plotting together how best to take the life of Ricky's new girlfriend. They sat in a cafe, discussing various methods of attack. The girls followed Hatcher's apartment for days, studying her daily routine and habits. They knew the lovers were planning to go to Mexico for the weekend, and that trip could shatter Delgado's hopes for good. Meanwhile, Kendra lived her normal life, completely unaware that two people were tracking her every move and choosing the date of her death. The happy young woman was preparing to spend the weekend with her beloved. So the girls settled on a method of execution. They decided shooting Kendra would be the best option. The problem was that neither of them knew how to handle a gun, let alone shoot and not miss. Brenda and Crystal decided to hire a hitman for a small sum of cash. Since they didn't know any guys willing to commit a crime, they decided to approach a stranger. The two conspirators went to a poor neighborhood in the city, and began asking men if they were willing to shoot someone for a reward. Naturally, most men with common sense didn't take the strange offer from the girls approaching them on the street seriously. Brenda and Crystal were nearly out of hope when they came across a 31-year-old guy named Christopher Love. As it turned out, Christopher had a rather shady reputation and made a living selling weed. Starting in his early teens, the young man had repeatedly come to the police's attention for robbery, burglary, and assault. To get Christopher to agree, Brenda, without much thought, lied to him, saying she had come from Mexico, where she had close ties to the mafia. In exchange for eliminating Kendra Hatcher, she promised to pay him cash and provide weed worth a total of $3,000. And Christopher agreed. He said he already had a gun, and they didn't need to worry about anything. On August 26th, Brenda finally completed her dental hygiene course. Her family and friends were proud that she had finally achieved her dreams. Even Ricky texted her during her final exams, wishing her luck. Perhaps he was trying to soften their breakup and be friendly. But to Delgado, it felt like her ex was simply mocking her. Then, Ricky sent her another message that drove the girl to complete despair. Paniagua said things with Kendra were very serious and that he had gotten a job in California where he planned to move with his fiancée. The young man wanted to say goodbye to Brenda as a friend, but in reality, that message sealed Hatcher's fate. Brenda and Crystal worked out the final details. Initially, they wanted to borrow a silver BMW from one of Delgado's friends, but at the last moment, the car wouldn't start. Jose, unaware of what the vehicle was needed for, selflessly offered to lend his Jeep. Brenda went with Jose to a restaurant to establish an alibi. Meanwhile, Crystal Cortez and Christopher Love went to carry out the deed. Since the girl herself admitted she was the driver who fled the crime scene, she was arrested. However, despite Brenda Delgado orchestrating the assassination, the police didn't have enough grounds to detain her. Investigators worried that the suspect might flee, and the case would drag on for years. Checking Brenda's record for possible violations, officers came across an unpaid parking ticket. They used it to arrest Delgado, buying themselves extra time to search for incriminating evidence against her in the parking garage shooting investigation. When the media reported Brenda's arrest, her friends, family, and even Ricky Paniagua couldn't believe this young woman could be involved in anything. After the tragedy with Hatcher unfolded, Brenda went out of her way to support her ex-boyfriend. Most acquaintances considered Delgado a kind, God-fearing Christian. Her image didn't align with a contract killing. Law enforcement also detained Christopher Love, the man who pulled the trigger. During his arrest, they found a gun matching the one used to shoot Hatcher. However, when the police asked him about Kendra and showed him her photo, Love claimed he had never seen the woman and categorically denied any involvement in the attack. But the detectives didn't need his confession, as they had enough evidence against him. Besides the murder weapon, his DNA was found in the black Jeep Cherokee, corroborating Crystal's account. Meanwhile, Brenda posted bail for the unpaid parking ticket, boarded a bus, and fled the country. The FBI added Delgado to its list of the 10 most wanted fugitives. A $100,000 reward was offered for information about her whereabouts. A few months later, in April 2016, Brenda was caught. She was living in Torreon, Mexico. She was tracked down with the help of Mexican law enforcement. The only problem was that, under Mexican law, a suspect couldn't be extradited to the U.S. if they faced the death penalty. So, the authorities had to promise that the death penalty wouldn't be pursued against Delgado. To ensure Brenda didn't escape justice and face the law, the prosecutor had to enlist the help of her accomplice, Crystal Cortez. The woman was offered a deal, 35 years in prison in exchange for testimony against Delgado and Christopher Love. The young mother agreed to cooperate with the police without hesitation. For the first time, she thought about her son, who would have to grow up without a mother, and that was likely the smartest decision she made in this story. In October 2018, Cortez pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 35 years in prison in exchange for testifying against her accomplices. Christopher's trial took place in October 2018. It took the jury just 2 hours of deliberation to find the man guilty of Kendra Hatcher's murder. He was sentenced to death by lethal injection. Kendra's family was more than satisfied with his punishment. However, Love's defense team tried to have some jurors removed, alleging they discriminated against the defendant's rights, but the request was denied. Love's defense even launched a petition about the trial titled "Free Christopher Love, an innocent father sentenced to death by a racist jury." The website's description claimed Crystal was an unreliable witness who accused an honest man. Brenda's trial took place in June 2019. Many different witnesses testified, including Ricky Paniagua. His former girlfriend stared at him intensely and likely felt no remorse at that moment. Delgado was found guilty of a serious crime and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Kendra Hatcher was a wonderful person who could have done a lot of good in this world. Nature and her parents endowed the girl with not only an attractive appearance, but also a remarkable character. However, Delgado's blind jealousy and unwillingness to accept her ex-partner's choice destroyed the young woman's life. Brenda's senseless crime not only failed to win back her beloved, but also condemned her to spend her entire life behind bars. If you have finished watching, you are a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications, and put the like. See you in the next video.